You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hello from the nether regions. I am your courier of doom, or whatever you want to call me. This is Les. You know who I am. I tell you guys this stuff all the time. It's Les, and I'm here with Steven. You know who Steven is. He's fantastic.
I don't know who I am.
You know, I have my days. I've been having those days a lot more lately. I'm like, who am I today? I feel like we were just on here yesterday recording.
Mm-hmm.
And
then the week just blows by.
I look up and the calendar said Friday, and yesterday, and I'm like, geez Louise. By the way, we record on Saturdays. If anybody wants to know, you don't need to see behind the curtain that much, but little things. So just kind of hop into a few things. Anything new with you? Got to ask that first.
Nothing new specifically with me, although I did want to touch on something that I feel like would affect the horror community in some aspect. I was actually talking about this gentleman not that long ago, and come to find out that stuntman George P. Wilbur, who some in the horror community may know as Michael Myers in Halloween 4 and Halloween 6, passed away. I believe he was 81 years old, so he wasn't a youthful lad, but still, it was a bit of a loss because, in my mind, you can take a look at the actors who played him or the Shape in the various movies. Have been much like Jason or whomever else, one of these silent killers. You can just trade out stuntmen for the gig, and I always felt like his portrayal in Halloween 4 and 6 were some of the better ones. That if you wanted to use, Nick Castle from the original, if you wanted to use him as the baseline Shape, and this was the man who set the pattern and the stage for how that character needs to be portrayed, George Wilbur is the one who did it right.
Yeah.
Because Dick Warlock, who did him in part 2, I don't feel like he understood the assignment. Because if you watch how he walks very slow and methodical and just very steady, and it just feels off, especially compared to the last film. Granted, you could argue, well, he's been shot 6 times, but when does that ever stop Michael Myers?
Right.
So I always found his portrayal to be a little off-putting. And then you had Donald Shanks, I think, did him in part 5 and 7, or was it just 5? I felt like there was a repeat offender in part 7, and I'm almost positive it was him. He did better in 7, I felt, or H2O, depending on how you want to look at it. But 5, he didn't feel off, but he didn't feel like he was necessarily understanding how to do it right. So I don't know. It's my personal preference is Nick Castle did him best, but George Wilbur was the one who did it right.
Yeah.
Going forward, and I think that's why those 2 entries kind of stand out for me personally, especially when it comes to the Shape in general.
And honestly, I think that's something people don't really pick up on a lot, and it kind of drives me crazy. Like when you talk to someone who's not really watched horror films, especially with characters that don't that don't talk necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
It's they can just put anybody in a mask and make them do it, and I don't believe that in the slightest. You look at different actors who have played characters, they all have their own little subtle things that they do, and you get to know a character a certain way,
Right.
Obviously, I think Hollywood's kind of picked up on that a little bit, because now they make these people sign these crazy contracts like, yeah, you have to play this character in X amount of films. But in a way, I get that, because people get used to it. It's the same thing with Jason. Everybody has their own favorite version of Jason.
Right.
So, and it's here I go talking about it. Get your shots ready. It's just like in Freddy vs. Jason. Ken Kersinger played Jason.
Mm-hmm.
Kane Hodder was slated to play Jason in it. And thinking about it, we would have gotten a very different version of Freddy vs. Jason if Kane Hodder had played Jason.
Sure.
The script would have been the same and everything, but Kane Hodder's performance as Jason, we would have seen a much more aggressive fighting Jason, I think.
Yeah.
You know, Ken's version sort of, he fought, but he was kind of methodic about it. He moved.
Yeah.
You know, Kane Hodder would do slight movements as Jason. They were like jerky movements. He would do the shoulder shrug, which, you know, showed Jason was frustrated. I would have loved to have seen that version, just to see what would have come of it. But, yeah, no, I think that's the thing with it. And, you know, just like with Nick Castle, he performed as the Shape. He went about it a certain way. So anybody that could capture that while still sort of making it their own, that's a win in my book.
Sure. And I even give a lot of credit to John Carpenter for his direction, just telling him not to think about it. You know, from all the stories I've heard, he told him point blank. Nick got into his head and he was like, "Should I do this? Should I do that?" And he's like, "No, just walk. Don't walk slow. Don't walk fast. Just walk. Don't worry about it." And that's all he had to do. And I think that's the problem a lot of these other stunt actors get into their head is for a character like that, they think they have to do a certain way. Because I would even say that going back to Dick Warlock in Part 2, he probably thought that's what he was doing, was what Nick Castle was doing, just walking slow, because he just walks. But he's not walking slow, he's just walking. But you don't think about it like that because he's not running. And I think that's the thing a lot of these people get into their head is like, well, the killer's got to run after you, but if he's just walking, then he's walking slow. But he's not.
Right.
He's just walking. So I think that's the element that they miss is just walk.
Yeah.
Nothing more than that. You don't have to overthink it, just walk.
And, you know, I think that's dangerous with any role, really. If you start to overthink it, like know your character, obviously, but don't overthink it. Like,
yeah, and even give credit to Kane for the little affectations he added to it, because it did kind of give Jason a bit more personality, which was nice.
Yeah.
And I felt kind of worked for the character. And I'm not saying that none of the other actors really did that, but not like he did.
Yeah.
You know, they each stuntman that did their bit added something to it or kind of did it in their own way. But I couldn't tell you one specific thing about the way they performed the character that made it stand out like Kane does.
Now, and he's played Jason consistently more than any other actor that has played Jason. So,
yes.
You know, when you stop and think about it, like, yes, he's not the first to play Jason, but because of how prominent he has been in the franchise, that's Jason.
Like, yeah, exactly.
You know, and to me, he's played Jason, and I know him as Jason so well that when he does play other characters, especially Victor Crowley, I think of Jason. Like, I feel like Victor Crowley is Jason's messed up cousin. Like, there's just something about it. He has a way of bringing that over, and it's not in a bad way. Like, that's the thing. Like, some actors, you see them, and I'm not trying to throw any shade at anybody, but you see them in a movie, and you're like, they're going to act like they've acted in every other movie. But Kane Hodder as Victor Crowley and Jason, to me, they're sort of one and the same a little bit, in a lot of ways, but it's in the best of ways.
Yeah.
And just,
it was almost a way for him to continue doing that role in a different light.
And just to give Kane Hodder a little bit more love, because while we're on the subject, I'm just going to say, what was it, New Blood, where the girl had the psychic powers?
Yes.
Okay, so Kane Hodder had, if you guys haven't watched To Hell and Back, the Kane Hodder story, give it a watch. There's a book if you want to read it. Kane Hodder got burned really badly over most of his body. He almost died because of it. And they say that the one thing that a burn victim is terrified of, obviously after suffering something like that, is fire. The fear of getting, caught on fire again. But I'm going to give that man props. He must have a big brass pair of cojones. I'm just going to say that now. Because in New Blood, she opens the furnace and she burns him. They hadn't really showed that in movies up to that point. They hadn't shown the person actually getting caught on fire. They would show like an explosion, then they would show the person on fire. So that was new completely. And everybody on that set thought Kane Hodder was going to have another stuntman do that scene.
Yeah.
But without hesitation, he was like, let's do it. I will give him props all day for that. That guy is a badass. And, you know, he's... even though he's getting a little bit older, he's still a badass.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And from what I've heard, he's like one of the nicest guys. And if you ever ask him what he's afraid of, I watched it in an interview. Somebody asked him what he was afraid of. They said, what is Kane Hodder afraid of? And his answer was actually really humbling. He's not afraid of anything, you know, like not snakes or spiders or heights or anything like that. The answer that he gave was basically things like dementia and Alzheimer's. He said, thinking about not being able to remember the people you love, that is the scariest thing in the world to me. And to me, I hadn't even thought about that. But for him to give an answer like that, like, just more respect to the guy. Like,
oh, yeah, for sure.
I hope if they somehow squabble this whole Friday the 13th thing, I know they're talking about doing a Friday the 13th without Jason as we know him, but if they were to figure their shit out and do a 13th Friday the 13th film and have Kane Hodder come back as Jason, I'd be just as excited about that as Robert Englund playing Freddy again. Not gonna lie. Like, but even with characters like Leatherface, you know, you can tell when different actors play Leatherface. You can.
Sure.
And, you know, I know you've always been on the fence with the remakes that they did of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think the guy that they picked to play Leatherface in that actually did it some justice. I think he did a decent job. I think the family that they picked was perfect. Yeah,
the remake is probably, if there was ever a section of the franchise that I would be okay with, it would be the remake and then its prequel. I think R. Lee Ermey, who played the sheriff or the patriarch of the family, he really kind of helped sell it. And I think if you didn't have some person like that who is charismatic enough to kind of carry the film, I don't think it would have been as good. But, you know, he kind of became the Cook character in some way where he had something about him that was just entertaining.
Yeah.
Because that was always the thing I loved about the Cook, and Jim Sedow's portrayal of that is he was just a nut job.
Yeah.
But he was just so enjoyable to watch, just going around, what are you fellers doing over here? Now, come on now, let's get the meat going. And it's just, I don't know, it's enjoyable. So he makes that enjoyable just the same way R. Lee Ermey does. So I give them credit, but it's the other sequels and the other things that they try to do, and they just try to...
We know how much you love Netflix's version.
Because they try to hold on to this essence of what it was as opposed to just moving forward.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand it would be a little harder to make that movie today with today's technology, but at the same time, even if you have cell phones, there isn't a cell tower everywhere.
Exactly.
And in the middle remote of Texas, come on.
I remember sending you that video when we were talking about horror movie tropes. And that's a trope that they used to use a lot, and now they don't use it as much anymore, and that's lack of cell phone service.
Yeah.
Like, they used to use it a lot, but now they don't. You know, okay, you think phones are still reliable? I'm sorry, but if you're in the middle of a swamp somewhere or in the middle of Texas somewhere, out in the middle of nowhere, you're not going to have service. I mean, it is what it is. Now, I got to say, too, just real quick, with those sequels that they did, I really wish they would have done one more sequel, because at the end of that movie, Leatherface gets one of his arms cut off.
Yeah.
That would have been an interesting thing to see. Or even see or even just make the film just a little bit longer, just so you could see how he would compensate for not having an arm.
Yeah.
Like, I think that would have been an interesting thing to see. Maybe that's just me, but I don't know. Just one of those things.
No, I get where you're coming from. And, you know, to not give too much credit to this movie that I really despise just as much as the Netflix version. I guess I don't despise it as much because the Next Generation film that they did that has Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger, at least they were attempting to kind of modernize the story. They weren't beholden to anything that had come before it. They were just like, well, what if that but today? And they went well out of left field with it.
Yeah.
But at least they weren't saying, oh yeah, all that other stuff did happen, but now we're going to continue on. And I guess the same could be said with part 3, but there are elements to that film that hint that it is a true sequel, like, you know, Stretch being in the film quietly in a scene and then going off screen. So you can attribute it to it being a sequel of sorts.
Now, which one was it? Terrible with remembering things. You in most of the movie, you find out, like most of the movie, the characters are trying to escape him, and the one girl finds out that she's actually related to him.
Yeah, that was Texas Chainsaw 3D.
Okay.
And the problem with that is that the timeline doesn't add up at all.
Yeah.
Because you're saying the events of 1974 or 1973 still happened, and then you say, well, now we're fast forwarding up to, 2009?
Something like
that. But then you start saying, well, Leatherface would be like 60 years old now.
Yeah.
Something's not adding up, and yet he still seems as spry as ever, hiding out in that their house basement for God knows how long.
And she was like his sister or his like niece or something?
I feel like it was niece or grandniece or
something like that.
Something like just... and even that was kind of fascinating. You know, there were elements to that that were kind of interesting.
And that was the thing. Like, I watched it. I think it was on Hulu or on Netflix or something at some point, and I had watched it. And I honestly, I didn't mind it. Like, it wasn't the best movie I'd ever seen, but I didn't mind it. But
yeah,
I'm with you. Where I'm like, the timeline doesn't make sense, but I do kind of like this thought that he had a family member that lived, and now this is sort of going back into. It felt like they were starting to rebuild the family, and I kind of thought that was an interesting concept.
Oh yeah, there were a lot of great concepts in that movie, and I don't put that at the bottom. I know that was the bottom of the barrel for a lot of people, but I think it's moved up now since you had the Netflix one, and the one that I've yet to watch, and I just have zero interest in watching, is Leatherface, which is that prequel.
Yeah.
Where it's supposed to be about a group of kids, and one of them happens to be the guy that will become Leatherface, but they try to make, from what I understand, again, I've not seen it, but it's like they try to lay out all these little breadcrumbs, making you think one of these kids is going to be Leatherface, and something about it doesn't add up by the end. Like, so this guy is the one that's Leatherface, but that doesn't add up to what we know, and I don't know, just...
And we just talked
from what I've heard of it, it's a disaster.
We just talked about this last week. They could have made a story about that, showing his family being nuts from the beginning and making him a sympathetic character, which would put a whole new meaning behind all of the other films that already exist. So
sure.
I mean, look, we went full circle there, back to last week's episode.
I mean, I do want to watch it, I guess, just out of curiosity, but I don't want to waste 90 minutes of my life.
Yeah.
I already watched the Netflix version. I don't want to do that again.
And, you know, it's just like with, just to mention Chucky real quick, you know, what is it, Brad Dourif, correct? Yes, he's played Chucky for how many years? Yeah,
going on 30.
You know, consistent, and people know him as Chucky. Now, I watched the remake. They've still got the original cast still doing things, but they've still got the remake that exists with, you know, Luke Skywalker himself as Chucky. I didn't hate that movie. I didn't hate it. And I think I didn't hate it because they did a new angle. If they would have just told the same story, I would have been all against it. But something about them doing a new angle, did I love the film? Not necessarily. Did I hate it? No. I thought it was an okay movie.
Yeah, we watched it not that long ago again, just as we were kind of going through the whole Chucky burn before season 2 came out of the show. And I remember we didn't hate it, and I think we were a little bit more critical about it the second time round, but at the same time, we still appreciated the angle. It wasn't trying to necessarily copy the original.
Yeah.
But obviously there were similar elements to it that kind of reflected back on the original.
Of course.
But I don't know. Yeah, I appreciated that too. Trying something different, trying a different angle, and trying to do that story, but just you're changing it up. So if you're going to remake something, don't copy it specifically, you know. And I've even argued this point: if you're going to remake a movie, why not remake a bad movie?
Exactly. Give
that had a good idea.
Yeah. Give a bad movie, a movie that might not have done well at the time because of maybe the budget, maybe the effects, maybe things like that. Give that another chance. Like, there's so many movies out there you could turn into something just phenomenal. And I mean, it's just
like, I know it would be a bit of a stretch right now, especially now, but I would love for there to be an opportunity that would come down the pipeline at some time and allow a remake of Friday the 13th Part 8 and actually have Jason terrorize Manhattan.
Yeah.
Whatever it would take to do that, the technology is there. You can fake New York all day. So make it happen.
I think it'd be cool.
I think it would be amazing because that's always the question. What if? If they'd have had the budget, what if? But they just didn't. They had to trim it and trim it and trim it until it became all about the boat and barely about Manhattan. Because, all the behind-the-scenes stuff that I've heard, they had so many ideas for New York.
It almost feels like they might have had so many ideas that they could have ended up turning it into a series. That would have been cool. So, But I was going to say something else, and I completely lost my train of thought on it. It'll come back to me at the most random time. But speaking of movies and, good movies, bad movies, movies that deserve remakes, because there's plenty of them that do. I know we've talked about this on the show a lot, and I know before we even started recording, we were both a little like, what are we going to talk about today? Because normally we have a plan. Today was just kind of winging it, I guess.
Yeah.
But in previous episodes, we've talked about how a lot of big directors and everything, they kind of shit on films that are streaming service exclusives. They think they're crap. And that is not the case. There are a lot of films, not just horror, but obviously we're going to talk about horror, but there are a lot of films that are Netflix exclusives or Hulu exclusives, Apple TV exclusives. I don't know much about Apple TV, but I'm going to throw that out there. Point is, every streaming service has exclusives.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of fantastic films that I don't think necessarily get the props that they deserve to get.
Sure.
So I thought maybe that would be an interesting subject to talk about. I know I'm going to be looking through a list because I've got some that I know off the top of my head. I've got some that I can't remember if they're exactly exclusives, but
right.
I figured we would hop into this. I can go first and name something, or you can go first. It's whatever you would like to do.
Well, I'll jump in real quick with a starter. That this would be a great example of starting out strong, in my opinion. A horror action type movie that went directly to streaming should have been a theatrical release, in my opinion. I think it would have done just fine. But it was theatrical, or it was streaming only, streaming on Hulu, and that is Prey, which is the Predator prequel. And talk about a solid entry into the franchise, especially when people really despised the last entry that came out in theaters, which was The Predator. And I didn't hate it, but I saw the cracks in it. I saw the issues with it. And I think it's one of the reasons I haven't watched it again, because I think maybe if I watched it a second time, I would really start to deconstruct it. And of course, don't even get me started on the ending. That was such a cop-out ending for that film of just this predator hunter armor or whatever the shit it was. It was just like, what is this? Like, you built all this up for that, and what is that supposed to be?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's beside the point. Prey, on the other hand, went directly to streaming premiere, and man, was it a solid entry, because they weren't worried about universe building, even though they did kind of, nudge a few little winks and nods here and there.
Yeah.
But it was just saying, well, what if we just did a Predator story at a different point in time, and that's that, and see what that would be. And it was fresh. It felt, I wouldn't say 100% original, but there was some originality to it, just in the sense of flipping the script a bit. So it wasn't high-tech trying to fight high-tech aliens. It was like, what if you had nothing? Yeah. And I know that really kind of goes back to the original in some aspect, where Arnold had to use the jungle as his way of fighting back, but she had a hell of a lot less than he did.
Yeah.
She really had to think on her toes, and man, was she ever clever. Like, I still to this day think that the way she took him out was just one of the most beautiful touches of the whole thing. And I've heard people, I don't know, just nitpick how it happened or whatever. I was like, just shut up, man.
I've seen a lot of stuff online about people saying, well, Arnold was he was a trained mercenary, and it took him all this fighting, and they all struggled to take the Predator down, and she didn't struggle at all. And my whole thought process was, it's a lot different. It's a different Predator. It's a different time. So the Predator, that species is more primitive at that point in time. yes, we are more primitive at that point in time as well, but it was still a story of a human being overcoming a great enemy.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that they went back and they made it more primitive actually helped with making the audience feel anxious.
Yeah.
It builds the suspense.
And I really hope we see more, because I don't really know if I want to follow that character again. Like, I love the character that Amber Midthunder played, and I thought her story was great. Even to what you were saying about how they tried to compare the two, she was a hunter.
Yeah.
Okay, this was livelihood. This wasn't a job. Like for Arnold, I mean, he's military. This was, he was out on a mission and he was just out to survive. This was pure survival.
Yeah.
Okay, she was out to hunt. They had to live, and something was threatening their lives and their livelihood as a whole. So this was pure survival on her. And so if you want to sit there and complain there's no comparison because of all the shit he had to do, they had 10 times more. Yeah. They were prepared for this from day one, because they are hunters. They are trying to survive.
Well, and that was my whole thought process with the film. That's where I found the most enjoyment. Predator is a hunter up against a hunter. And just thinking of two hunters up against each other, what could be better?
Yeah.
And I kind of like, I think it was Predators, maybe, where they had like the different classes of there were the Predator. You find out that they take DNA and they're basically building like a super Predator.
Oh, that would have been the Predator.
Maybe that's okay. Yep, that's correct.
Yeah.
I thought that aspect of that film was kind of interesting, and to me that kind of made sense. So going back and seeing, like, that was another complaint I saw about this film, about Prey. Everybody said the Predator seemed, it didn't look like a normal Predator. It wasn't as cool as the original. And I'm thinking to myself, the Predators are going to adapt and change over time. This species has been around forever. Obviously, they're going to change and they're going to adapt. Even the xenomorphs in the Alien series, there were different versions. If a xenomorph, a xenomorph, gosh, I can't talk today. If a xenomorph, in the one movie, they impregnate the dog.
Yeah.
And it's a smaller xenomorph. If they attach to people, there's different versions. There's all sorts of different versions of the xenomorphs. You have your xenomorph queen. You have, I think they're kind of like a beehive. It doesn't really go over it in the movies a lot, but if you actually look into reading about the xenomorphs, there's so many different versions of them.
Mm-hmm.
Why not the Predators have, the same kind of regard? There has to be different classes. It's just like people. We're all different. It's not like every Predator that gets born is an exact carbon copy of another one.
Sure.
And that, that's where I'm like, we have a much more primitive, Predator here. And I loved the Predator in Prey. I loved his weapons. Sure. I loved how they were still more advanced than anything that anybody on Earth had at that time.
Right, but there was a bit of primitiveness to them as well.
Exactly. And to me, the Predator in Prey kind of screamed steampunk. Like his weapons were like steampunk type weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. So I will side with you on that completely. I think that is an extremely solid entry. Most definitely through and through. But do you have anything else on Prey? Because I feel like you had something else you had to say about it.
Well, just that whether or not we actually follow the main character in that again, or maybe just take a page from that. And I think a lot of people were saying that after it came out and we're talking about how good it was. Why not just use, until you can find an angle maybe to where you want to build on sequels, drop Predators in different timelines or different time periods and have them face off with different types of people and different cultures. And just the idea of that alone is fascinating to me, because this was something new. So think of another group of people that could be primitive, but that could be fascinating to watch, Yeah,
I mean, I know the idea was floating around of a Predator being dropped in feudal Japan.
Yes.
That would be badass. I would personally like to see a Predator take on a Viking village.
Oh, that would be
Seeing a Viking warlord with a battle axe going toe to toe with a Predator, and it doesn't have to be one Predator. What if it's two Predators? That way you can get a little bit more bang for your buck, a little bit more fighting. I think that would be badass. So
Yeah, I think that would actually work out a lot better because I feel like Vikings, I feel like they would have a bit of a power advantage in numbers and strength and size. So you'd want a big burly predator and then maybe a few others to kind of back him up. So you could almost have like a small group, I won't say army, a small group of predators that have to go up like a huge Viking battalion or something like that.
That would be cool. You could have like maybe 5 predators, have the leader like be like an older predator that's they age and everything. Everything ages, but to see like a big old predator that's just stacked. Just let's just be honest, like a predator that power lifts. Let's just put it that way, and then have some younger predators. Maybe go off the angle that people have been talking about with the feudal Japan. Have an older predator that is training younger predators, going up against. Shadow that with the Vikings. Have an old Viking leader and some of the young and fit people in the tribe, in the tribe go up against these predators. Because 5 predators, you're gonna need a pretty big army to go up against. But that would be cool because you could get, and I mean even maybe not even a movie. Maybe that would make a cool series.
Yeah, why not?
If you put more story into it, you could do hour-long episodes, and you could instead of sitting through like a 5-hour movie, have 5 1-hour episodes or something like that. You're still gonna get it out there. I mean,
correct me if I'm wrong, but the more we're talking about this, I'm almost positive I did hear that there was a Predator series in the works.
I think there was.
So maybe they're going to do that idea. Who knows?
That would be cool.
That'd be great.
That would be extremely cool.
But yeah, that's all I wanted to mention on that. But that's a solid entry of a streaming film that did not go to theaters that is very solid.
That is a good one. I have one that I'm not sure if you've seen. I just so happened to watch it just kind of on a whim. It was called Before I Wake. It was a Netflix exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
So it follows a little boy. These people adopt him. And whatever this little boy dreams comes into reality.
Okay.
So all of his good dreams come into reality, but his nightmares do too.
Okay.
Well, I'm trying not to, I don't want to spoil the movie for you, but I got to kind of talk about it a little bit. There is a villain in the film called the Canker Man.
Okay.
And this being in his dreams, it takes people, and nobody knows where these people go. The gentleman that played he played the Punisher.
Thomas Jane?
Is that the one who played with John Travolta?
Yes.
Yes, I believe it's him if I remember correctly.
No offense, John Bernthal. Just that's the first person that came to mind.
Yeah. But this woman and him, they adopt this little boy, and he actually ends up getting taken.
Okay.
And the story itself, the effects are great in it. Canker Man is scary as hell. But when you find out why these things are happening, why this kid has this thing called the Canker Man, it pulls on your heartstrings. Like, it's actually sad. And I watched it on a whim. I saw a trailer for it, and they don't talk about the sad part of the movie. Like, they don't talk about that at all. And so I'm sitting there and I'm watching this film, and I'm loving all the creep factor and everything. The woman goes to another person that had adopted this little boy at one point, and this guy's wife had gotten taken.
Mm-hmm.
And as the little boy gets older, he can't remember what she looks like completely. So when he would dream her into reality, she wouldn't look right. She would look all messed up.
Right.
And the guy just couldn't do it anymore. So the guy gave him, back to the adoption agency. But when you find out what happens at the end, when you find out why this little boy sees this thing called the Canker Man and everything, you sit there and you just go, man, I feel so terrible for this kid.
Mm-hmm.
It caught me completely off guard, and it kind of got shit on a little bit. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's the best movie that's ever come out,
Right.
but it's definitely a solid film. I think if it would have gotten a theatrical release and they would have marketed it the right way, I think it would have done really well. And everybody in it is fantastic at really conveying their emotion. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but
I haven't. Mm.
yeah, if you get the chance, I would watch it. Try not to spoil too much of it, but just to give you an idea, when the little boy was when he was even littler than he is in the movie, he saw the word cancer and he thought it was pronounced canker. So the Canker Man is basically what he thinks cancer is.
Gotcha.
in a physical form. It's a manifestation of a physical cancer that's a monster that takes people away, and it's it's brutal.
It was rough.
In the trailer for it, there's a scene where he like looks under his bed, he's asleep, and then he comes up and there's this little boy behind him that has like hollowed out eyes, it looks like, and he grabs him up real quick.
Yeah.
And that's what sold me. That's what made me watch it. So
Okay.
another solid entry, definitely one that if you do get the chance to watch it, give it a watch. It's not real long. I think it's a little over an hour.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you get the chance to watch it, you'll have to let me know what you think of it, because it's, yeah, it's fantastic.
Will do.
But go ahead and name another one if you've got one.
All right. Well, this one I am going to argue in favor of 3 at the same time, because I feel like a studio, the production company, missed out on a opportunity to make bank at the box office, because I truly feel this would have made bank at the box office, and that is the Fear Street trilogy that came on Netflix. Now, their marketing was very clever. They paced them out. I think it was over the course of 2 weeks.
Yes.
It was like one, release here, 2 weeks later, next release, 2 weeks, next release, something like that. They were very close together. I would argue, on the other hand, that if they'd have released these in theaters, you could have done 3 all in the same year. One in the early, like January, February, somewhere in June, July, and then the last one in November, December, and you would have cleaned up.
Oh, yeah.
Because these were really good. I was really impressed about how good these were, and the fact that they all tied in together.
Yeah.
So it was almost like watching a proper trilogy of films that all tied in and all had different stories, but just it all worked. And I did not expect to enjoy them.
Yeah.
I was intrigued by the idea, and then I heard, I think, a review for the very first one, and I thought, all right, well, let me give it a watch. And by the end of it, I was like, holy shit, this is really good. I want to see the next one. I'm really curious. And despite what you may think of the stories themselves or however it was, for a horror film, this was one of the best ones to come out in a long time.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I think these may have come out around 2020. Was it 2020? Because I was trying to think of the reason why they hit streaming, so that may have been a factor.
I think it was in like 2020 that they came out, if I remember.
2021. Right. Okay, so
right around that time. So
the idea could have been to release them in theaters, and then COVID just put a pin in that, which is understandable. So I really hate that they got screwed out of that, because it seems like they had a very solid idea, and if the plan was to release them in theaters, COVID screwed that up for a lot of people. Yeah. I noticed. Well, so this could have easily been a casualty to that. But I truly believe this could have, like, the very first one may have done really well, got word of mouth, and then more people saw it. Then the second one would have really just amped it up. Yeah. I think that would have been the one that you saw profits increase. I don't know about the third one. Like, if that would have just carried over, I would hope so. But audiences are fickle like that.
I would honestly, I would argue just real quick, I loved all 3 of them. The third one, to me, is definitely the weaker entry. Mm-hmm. But normally, for some reason, the third films, and we've kind of had this conversation too, third and fourth films and everything. The third film sort of, it's a little slow paced in the beginning, which I think would turn off people a little bit. But then you get into the finale of it. Yeah. And to me, that just wrapped everything up so very well. Right. And fun fact, for people who might not know this, Fear Street is based off of books, and good old lovable R.L. Stine, who wrote Goosebumps for little kids, wrote the Fear Street series for older kids. So the same guy that gave us, Night of the Living Dummy and all those fun little Goosebumps stories, wrote these masterpieces as well. And a lot of people don't know that.
And the fact that they didn't tame it down to try to target like a PG-13 audience, I was really happy about as well. Because they could have. They could have been like, well, this is for teenagers, where Goosebumps is for the kids. And then they had that kid show for Goosebumps. So they could have easily just been like, PG-13, we get our audience. But I guarantee you, if it had wound up in theaters, that might have been the case. Yeah. But considering the amount of gore they put into it, I can't imagine that was a thought from the beginning. I think they were looking to go hard R from the jump.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
And I think the thing that really helped the film, too, they obviously, I think she's in the first one in a flashback, but they did bring the girl from Stranger Things, the redheaded girl from Stranger Things. She's in Fear Street. And I think that helped a lot with them releasing it on Netflix. I do think that did help to a degree. But spoiler alert for anybody listening out there, Fear Street, the first one, has one of my favorite deaths in a movie in it, and I'm sure you can probably guess which one it is.
I'm drawing a blank, to be honest.
They're in the store in the bakery section. The bread cutter to the head scene.
Yes, that was brutal.
And another thing about the films that I love, it's 1974, so it's the second one, if I remember right. When the girl's boyfriend gets possessed and he goes on the killing spree at the camp.
Yeah.
I really loved how cold they made the character. There was no reasoning with him, nothing like that. He was just, it's like the switch just got turned on and it was just kill, 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 kill. And I'm with you in the regard of, I don't like when kids get killed unless it serves a purpose. The scene really hit me hard when the one little kind of heavyset kid sees him and he goes to talk to him, and you know what happened.
Yeah.
It's brutal. It really pulls at you. You find it really shocking, but I think it really helps push the whole thought process of there's no getting out of this. This guy's gone.
Right.
And I love when they trap all the killers and everything in the third part, when they trap them all at the mall and everything. And the skeleton killer, just, man, probably my favorite one.
Yeah, it was a solid design.
So, when you start getting all these different characters and all these different stories, things can get a little mucked up. But I think they did a fantastic job. That they explained just enough of the backstory for all the killers, but they didn't go crazy with it. And I really appreciated that. That to me made it solid enough on its own.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would give that
I agree.
one, definitely. Let's see here. Did you ever get the chance to watch Hush?
I did not, but I am aware of it.
Hush is another one of those films. Did not think I was going to like it. I thought the idea sounded just a little crazy. A deaf author is in her cabin in the middle of nowhere. I think she's got like one neighbor up the road, when a killer comes in and wants to do his thing. There's no other way to describe it. It sounds like a pretty simplistic story.
Yeah.
But they really play off of the fact that she's deaf. There's a scene in particular in it where she's got her back turned to the one window or to the door or whatever, and she's typing. And her friend, who she previously talks to, is banging on the door trying to get help because the killer is coming for her. Her friend gets shot with a bow and arrow, a crossbow or whatever you want to say. Doesn't hear any of it. Anything at all. Her friend gets killed, and she's like 10 feet away from her. The killer taunts the girl. She can read lips and everything, and they like have a conversation through the glass, and she can read his lips, so she knows what's going on. He stalks her in certain scenes, and you don't know that she's there. And they do something that I really appreciated, which The Walking Dead just got credit for this in one of their like close to final episodes. They turned off the sound while you're watching the film, so you hear it from her perspective. Like,
right.
You know what she's experiencing. So there's a scene in particular where she's moving, and the killer he's there. He knows where she's at, and she can't hear him. She doesn't know that he's where he's at. And I remember sitting there watching it, yelling at my TV like, he's right there! I'm yelling at a TV, which nobody can hear me through a TV, and the lady's deaf anyway, so if she could hear me through the TV, not really going to help anything.
Right.
And it's not one of those things where... One thing that drives me crazy about horror films in general is I feel like when some characters get hurt, they still just keep going, and they don't slow down at all when they get hurt in certain films.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a problem with the writing. You get stabbed, they get stabbed in the leg, they limp for a little bit, and the next thing you know, they're running way too fast, for just getting stabbed in the leg or something. Yeah, no. She gets shot. I think she gets an arrow through the leg, and that shit affects her for the rest of the movie.
As it should.
And I love that they keep building it up. Like, there's really a part in it where you think she's gonna die, and you really feel for her, and you're like, please let this lady make it. Please let her make it. Like I'm sitting there on the edge of my seat, which doesn't happen very often with horror films. But I'm sitting there on the edge of my seat like, come on, lady, come on, you got this, you got this, you got this. And she actually uses the fact that she's deaf in part of the film to help herself. She has this extremely loud alarm system in her house. It's basically if somebody opens the door or if there's like a fire or something, it's loud enough to where if a normal person's in there, it's going to instantly cause you pain.
Right.
But she can actually make it out a little bit. So it notifies her. So it has to be something loud, which things like that really do exist. So it's not out of like the realm of possibility. But she actually uses that to her advantage in part of the film. And she does end up surviving. I'll just spoil that for you now, because normally the heroes end up surviving most of the time anyways. But it's definitely one of those anxiety-inducing films.
Right.
And the fact that they are able to show it from her perspective, that they muffle the audio and they just remove the audio sometimes in it. And I mean, when I first watched it, I thought there was something wrong with my TV there for a second. I'm like, I see what they're doing here. And it really just it makes you think about what it would be like if somebody who was really deaf or, blind or something went through something like this. And it's one of those films I feel like it got slept on.
Yeah.
But it finally did gain some traction, and it's got great reviews. It's got fantastic.
I mean, it was directed by Mike Flanagan, who's done quite a few really solid horror entries. In fact, for Netflix alone, I think he was responsible he did Gerald's Game.
Which I was going to bring up.
I feel like he did what was that other Stephen King? I know he's done a few Stephen King adaptations.
In the Tall Grass, and then there's 19...
Yeah, that was the other one I was trying to think of. 1912? 28? Something like that with Thomas Jane.
Yeah.
And then he also did, I think he was behind the Haunting of Hill House in Bly Manor.
Yeah.
I think those were his as well. So, I mean, he's proven himself a very capable director, especially in horror.
And I think Hush came out before the rest of those. Which have you seen the I don't think it's 1928, but have you seen that? No,
it was one of those that I wanted to watch at some point and just never got around to. I slept on it.
It's solid as well. It's kind of a slow burn, but as you see him like descend into madness, it's definitely worth it. And it makes you ask a lot of questions, like if he was imagining if he was truly being haunted, or if he was imagining things because of his guilt. It really just it puts you in a rabbit hole, most definitely. But yeah, I think Hush came out before the rest of those. I think that might have been one of his first ones that he did for Netflix, maybe. But,
could have been the thing to get him the deals.
Yeah, but I mean, if that's again one of those ones, you get the chance. Not just you, but anybody who's listening who has not watched it, definitely worth a watch. It's pretty quick to get into the story too, which I appreciate. I like slow burns, but I feel like this one doesn't work very well as a slow burn because you kind of follow her through a lot of the beginning, and it's just her doing her like day-to-day stuff, her regular stuff. And if they would have, spread that out too long, then I think it would have really hurt the story. So
right.
But I'll let you go ahead and name another one and kind of look at here.
So all right, I'm going to throw this one out since these were fairly new on my view list as something unique as far as horror, because again, we're talking about horror going straight to streaming, just so we're all aware, and how streaming gets a reputation for being not good. Kind of like, I mean, going to streaming is almost like the comparison of going direct to video.
I was just going to
like it used to be back in the day.
Yeah.
And even then, I don't feel like that's a fair comparison because there were a lot of straight to video releases that I loved.
Yeah.
Growing up. So this follows into that same category. There's 2 films in this series now, and like I said, I was a little late to the party with the first one, but Scare Package would be another great addition to straight to streaming. The first one got picked up by Shudder. Second one, same deal. They're a lot of fun for a horror film because it mixes great black humor. It mixes in some just good gore and plays on the horror tropes. I honestly feel like these could have really done great in theaters. Now, granted, the first one, if it had gone to theaters, I probably would have recommended it trim a story or two,
Yeah.
just to kind of keep the pace going a little faster. Because I don't want to knock on any of the stories because they're all there for a purpose, and some are better than others. So I think if you were to target this to theaters, you would want the biggest bang for your buck. So really trim out some of the lesser ones. There was maybe even one in the very first one that stood out like a sore thumb by comparison to the others. As good as it was, it just had a more serious tone than the others did.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's why it was just kind of jarring. Like I said, it was good, but by comparison, you go from something that's a little bit more dark humor and then go back to the dark humor, but somewhere in between all the humor was gone.
Yeah.
So you're like, I don't know what's going on. Am I supposed to laugh or what? So, but I mean, both films were solid. In fact, I might have to say I think I liked the second one a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there was just something to it where it was a little bit more streamlined. Like they narrowed it down to lesser stories, and then they had this Saw backdrop to all the stories that they were playing on that and kind of toying with that. So I thought they were both fun. I would love to see more of this because it also allows other filmmakers to come in and tell short stories.
Yeah.
So they can kind of get their hand in it a little bit, and it works with the story, the narrative element to it, where everyone's getting a little taste of a movie here, a little taste of a movie there, and obviously they're just a lot of insane ideas that someone threw out and said, yeah, it doesn't hurt the overall narrative.
Yeah.
It's just a cutaway. All right, here's that story, come back, and then we deal with that. So I thought they were a lot of fun. I think they could have really done well in theaters. In fact, I think the first one may have been a sleeper hit in theaters.
Yeah.
Where word of mouth got around, then it probably would have picked up on, home release, streaming, stuff like that, gotten the bigger react, kind of like Terrifier. I think that it would have worked in the same way Terrifier did, where you had a movie that no one really heard about, and then suddenly word of mouth got around, sequel comes out, and then boom, they make a killing on the theater circuit. I think Scare Package 2 could have done the same thing.
I think if they would have released the first one in theaters, if they would have had Joe Bob Briggs mention that he's in the first one,
yeah,
to the Mutant fam, I think they might have gone out to the theater to watch it. Is he in the second one? I know this. I know the first one. He basically,
No, he was more or less just, you saw elements where it was still kind of paying homage to certain elements to him, but no, he's not in the second one, which unfortunate. I think honestly, well, I'll take that back. I think he was in it, but it wasn't like an actual on-screen appearance, more like a clip from a show or something that he'd already pre-filmed. So I think in technicality he was in it, just not like he was in the original.
Might have been busy elsewhere and couldn't make it. He seems like the kind of guy that would be pretty eager to do that kind of stuff. So
yeah, his appearance was a welcome sight. In Scare Package.
Well, I remember us talking about Scare Package. I mentioned to you that he was in it and everything. My favorite. I haven't gotten the chance to watch the second one yet, but I love in the first one. There's a scene they play off the whole camping. It's like teenagers out camping and everything, and there's that skeleton guy that melts.
Yeah.
And he's like, please just help me. I promise I won't bite you or anything. And and then he bites her. He's like, I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. And then she starts melting. It's so dumb, but
it works.
Yeah, it's campy, it's cheesy. To me, Scare Package kind of felt like it was paying tribute from movies from the 80s all the way up until now. Like it was sort of, they understood that there's a bunch of horror movie tropes, there's a bunch of gimmicks, and there's all that campy stuff that makes it fun. And they just was like, let's put it in a movie.
Yeah.
So
it's the fun factor of it, and I think that's the element sometimes that gets lost with horror films. And I'm not saying all need to be fun, like Hush. I can't see there being a fun element to that.
Yeah.
But you have to pick your lane. If you want to make a fun horror film that's just outrageous and exciting, then stay in that lane. And that's kind of the part where I kind of pointed to that one story in the first one that just seemed out of place.
Yeah.
It as good as it was, it just did not belong here, or at least in my opinion, it didn't. Whereas something like Hush, they know they're going in for something more serious. So if you ever did anything that's goofy, silly, campy, you detract from the theme that you're trying to touch on. And I feel like sometimes some movies don't quite know where they want to be, and they don't understand you have to go one way or the other. You can't teeter both lines, and some can.
Yeah, and I think because I believe in Hush, there's like one part where the killer makes a joke, but it's funny to him. Yeah. But as a person watching the film, you're like, that's really messed up. Yeah. And I feel like that's okay if you're going with a serious angle. If you're gonna add anything even remotely like funny to a serious horror film, make it something, as bad as this sounds, make it something that if the audience laughs about it, they instantly feel bad that they laughed about it, if that makes sense.
No, I can get that, yeah.
Like, it's kind of funny, but it's kind of messed up that I find that funny. Like, that kind of makes sense to me.
You chuckle and in the back of your head, you're like, well, I'm going to hell.
Yeah, I mean, that's my typical Tuesday, but... Now, speaking of horror films that are funny and have some comedy to them, I've got two, which is funny. You just talked about two. I've got two. They were Netflix exclusives. The Babysitter and The Babysitter Killer Queen. I loved both of these movies. It starts out so subtle, and you don't think anything's crazy, and, little boy gets up, sees his babysitter and all of her friends down in the front room, and next thing you know, she's stabbing knives into a guy's head. And from there, shit just hits the fan, and, I mean, you've seen both of them, right?
I have not.
Have you seen either one of them?
I have not.
Oh, man.
It's one of those that it was on my to-do list, and I just never got around to it.
So, the babysitter and her friends are going to drink this guy's blood, and they have to get some blood from the kid that she babysits, because they need some blood of the innocent, because they're making a deal with the devil so they can all get what they want. And this kid is, like, his parents treat him like he's allergic to everything. Like, they treat him like such a baby. And this kid somehow manages to accidentally kill everybody. And I mean accidentally in the nicest of ways. There's a jockey guy, and it's hilarious. He comes to because they knock him out. He's tied up, and when he comes to, the jockey guy has his shirt off. And the very first question he's like, why is he not wearing a shirt? And the guy's like, really? That's your first question? And he goes through all the motions. He kills, all these accidents happen. Everybody dies. One of my favorites is there's this jockey guy. It's the one with no shirt on, and he's outside, like, choking the kid to death when they hear somebody egging the house. He puts him down, he walks him over, and he's like, you go over there, and you kick his ass. You teach him a lesson for egging your house. And he's like, are you serious right now? And he's like, kid's name's Colt. He's like, Colt, you gotta stand up for yourself, man. Goes over, and all that crap happens, Well, then we get back to the killing, and Colt climbs up his treehouse, and there's a rope there, and the jock guy climbing up, he gets a hold of Colt, and he gets egg on his hands, and somehow something happens that makes him slip. I think the wood on the treehouse is bad. And he, like, slips, and when he goes to grab the rope to escape, to keep himself from falling, the rope somehow manages to get tied around his neck, and he breaks his neck. The only person who he remotely hurts on purpose is the babysitter. He hits her with a car. He drives a car through his house, and he hits her with a car.
Good God.
Well, the sequel come out, and they brought back all these characters. They all come back from the dead to get revenge on Colt and to still get what they want. And it's just as wild and crazy, and the way it ends is really touching, though, because you find out that the babysitter's not really... Yes, she made a deal with the devil, but she made a deal with the devil for a good reason. Okay. Plus, Jenna Ortega is in the sequel.
Oh, okay.
And she is fantastic in it. I love her in it. She's a new kid at the school, and they have her introduce herself, and she says all this crazy stuff, and she goes, and by the way, I'm 2 weeks late. Or she says something about being late. Oh, yeah, she says, I'm late, and they're like, no, you're on time. She's like, that's not what I mean. She goes and she sits down. And so somebody makes a joke about her being pregnant. She's like, oh, I just made that shit up to see what everybody would do. But she's fucking nuts in it. And I don't know what it is about the comedy in it. All the characters, they're still pretty much the same in the sequel. They're still those, like, idiot teenagers that they've always been. And I love the actress who plays the babysitter in it. I've seen her in a lot of things.
Wasn't that Samara Weaving?
I believe so, if I remember correctly. I had such a crush on her. Still kind of do,
yeah,
not gonna lie.
She's solid.
Yeah. So definitely a recommended film. If you want the horror and the comedy, this movie, the first one does it really well. The second one just ups it, and it's, I don't know, there's just something that's funny about it. I mean, even there's even a girl in it who she thinks she's the hottest thing ever, and she's up on top of this cliff and she falls and she gets stuck between these rocks, and she's like trying to shoot the kid. She's got a gun and she's stuck because her boobs are so big. She's just stuck and she can't get to him, and she's like reaching down like, Colt, you better not be staring at my ass, you little perv, and making all these jokes. And I mean, the gore factor's there too. They grab her legs and they start pulling down and they rip her head off.
Ooh, shit.
Yeah. So the gore is there, like 100% there, and it's just the reactions to all the gory stuff that happen. Even that stuff's funny. Like they stabbed in the first one, when they stabbed the guy in the head, they stabbed him on both sides of his head, and one guy's taking it, he's trying to fill the cup, and he's like, why ain't my side working? There's nothing coming out. And he pokes, and then blood just squirts all over his face. He's like, oh God, it went in my mouth. It's the dumbest shit that you'll ever see, but in the best of ways. And yeah. I don't know how well it did on Netflix, but from my understanding, it was really, really popular. It got really good reviews everywhere that it was.
I remember hearing good things about it, and it was, again, one of those that I had put on my list, but I just never got around to it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well, and I know if it would have been released in theaters, we probably would have seen like a really good turnout for it, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think it would have dominated. And I've been hearing rumors that they kind of wanted to do a third one, but truth be told, unless they told a really creative story, the way that the second one ended, I don't know what they would do.
And sometimes it's just best to leave it be.
Yeah, and I would be completely fine with it. And you and I both know, my wife, Samantha, is not a big horror movie fan. Mm-hmm. Crazy, I know. But she actually, she's watched both of them with me. Probably not all the way through on the first one completely. She's seen it not in one sitting, but she has seen it because I've watched it multiple times. But the second one, she's actually pretty much watched the whole thing with me, and she actually thought it was pretty good. So that's saying something on her part.
Sure.
You know, heck, maybe that's something we can do. I know we're coming down to visit. Maybe we could.
That's true.
Watch a movie or two. I know I'm thinking about bringing my my recording stuff and maybe record an episode. Maybe we could do a video or something and post it up somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean,
we can figure it out.
I think that'd be kind of cool, but but yeah, the Babysitter films, definitely a watch because they are fantastic. They make old movie references. They do all kinds of crazy stuff. So definitely another one I would put on there. Go ahead, because I feel like I know you've got something eating at you.
Well, I'm trying to decide which one I want to go with here.
And just so you know, I feel like this could actually be a multiple part episode. So
probably, yeah. Okay. This one might be a harder sell.
Okay.
Because I've said that this is an acquired taste film.
Okay.
But if you're horror junkies like we are, I think even if you watched it the first time, it would leave such an imprint that you would want to come back to it a second time and you would find love for it. And that is Fried Berry, which is a Shudder exclusive. I know it went through a few film festivals before it wound up on Shudder, so it never technically went to theaters, but it did make the rounds on a few. I think it was actually South Africa was where the actor. Actually, a lot of the film and everything were shot, and the directors from there. So a lot of the festivals were in and around that. Maybe even some others nearby. I don't remember where specifically, but yeah, Shudder picked it up. I remember the very first time I watched it, I was confused by it all, but it never left my head because there were elements to it that just stuck with me, and I was like, there's something more to this that I'm not getting, but I want to understand it more. And I went back and I watched it a second time, showing someone else, because I was like, you've got to check this out because I think you'll really dig it. And in that second viewing, I was like, I got it now. I see what this is. It's a very dark comedy type horror film that the best way to really look at it would be like, what if E.T. but on drugs? And that would be a good way to do it, to look at it in some aspect. And if you're unfamiliar with the story, it's about a guy who was a strung out drug addict who gets abducted by aliens, and they replace him with one of their own in his skin to then just explore and examine the world in which he comes from. And it's just so bizarre and wild, and it's a trip, but if you stick with it and just really give it a moment, it's really, really good. I mean, the awards it won in the festivals are for a reason. It wasn't just some no-nonsense thing that no one remembers for whatever reason. There's a reason. You just have to. It could be a little bit more cerebral than some people are used to, but it's so good if you just give it time to really sink in. And I even hate telling people that, because one of the things I hate more than anything is when someone will say, you got to check out the show. Yeah, you might have to get through the first few episodes before it picks up, but you know, it's really good. And it's like, but you're telling me I got 2 or 3 hours that I'm just going to be bored off my ass until it really gets good. I want it to get good from the jump, so I'm invested. And I can't really say that about this, but I guarantee you, if you watch it and you don't feel like you got it, it's going to sit with you. And you'll want to come back to it. And if you do, watch it again, and I guarantee you're going to have a new love and appreciation for it. So highly recommend Fried Berry.
I'll jump in real quick just to say, I remembered you talking about this, and for the life of me, whenever I've heard you say Fried Berry here lately, I couldn't remember what it was, so I had to look it up, and then as soon as I saw the cover, I was like, wait a minute, I watched this, because I think when it had only been out for maybe a couple weeks, and you said that I should check it out. And I remember sitting there, and I get where you're coming from with, you got to give it a little time, because I'm sitting there and I'm watching it and I'm like, okay, this is definitely different. But the scene that made me, as bad as this sound, the scene that really made me go, whoa, there was the prostitute scene.
Yeah.
He meets the prostitute, and he goes in, and her stomach instantly grows, and she has a baby right then and there. And her pimp comes in, and he's like, what the fuck is going on? Yeah. As soon as I saw that, I was like, okay. And made it through the made it through the whole movie, but I was like, it's definitely, I don't want to say it's a slow burn. It's definitely one of those things where you really do have to, if you're going to watch it, make sure that you're sitting there and you're paying attention.
Yeah.
And just give it the time to kind of sit in. It's one of those movies I think you have to think about. So.
Yeah. Oh, for absolutely. And, I don't really feel like it overstays its welcome in any way, because even the second time I watched it, I felt like it moved a little faster.
Yeah.
Where it was just like, all right, I got it. I know what's happening here. And I know this isn't something we've normally talked about. Maybe this could be an episode 2 that we could do a bit on, but the score itself is one of those that I have listened to on its own, because I love the synth techno type vibe that it's I'm trying to remember the composer's name. Hazer, I think is his name, and he does stuff in that same vein. And I think I even said, with Ryan Kruger, the director of this film, and just the insanity he came up with, plus that music from Hazer, they should team up and direct a movie based on a video game that I love so much called Hotline Miami. Yeah. Because the atmosphere that they give this film feels very much in line with what that movie could be. And I think all around it's a wonderful package that more people need to give an extra look at if you haven't already. And if you didn't care for it the first time, maybe, I mean, I'm not going to push and say that, well, you just don't understand what you're talking about. I mean, like I said, it's an acquired taste type film that I think won't win everybody over. But again, if you're thinking about it for even a moment after you get done, rewatch it, because something stuck with you. And I guarantee you're gonna change your mind the second time round.
Yeah. I've got 2 that I would like to talk about.
Okay.
I had to look up the because I wanted a little bit more information about the one. There's a movie called Cam. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it or anything.
It kind of sounds familiar, but I can't place anything about it.
Trying to remember, I think it was a Netflix exclusive. Yeah. So Cam is, I'm gonna just put this out here first. It was at the height when people were on TikTok talking about OnlyFans and everything, and all those cam services, where they put on sexual shows and they get paid. That's when Cam came out.
Okay.
I'm going to read this is just a little synopsis about it. So, when her account is stolen by a lookalike, a Cam girl sets out to unmask the mysterious woman and get her identity back. Did not think I was going to like this movie.
I mean, even by the description alone, it wouldn't have been something I'd jump into.
This film was... You ever get weirded out when you see somebody, like you're out in public and you see somebody that kind of looks like they could be your doppelganger?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this really plays on that. This girl wants to be the top Cam model. Like, that's her goal. That's what she wants. And her account, it legitimately, it gets stolen. And it, like it says, it's by a lookalike. Well, things start to get a little more sinister. This other version of her starts to do all kinds of just terrible, terrible things.
Mm-hmm.
And this girl starts to, like, suffer the consequences of them. And there's even a part where this Cam model joins another model. Come to find out, this other model's been missing, and they find her dead, and everything else. I don't remember exactly what happens toward the end. There's a scene in it where the real girl starts hitting her face off of her desk,
Mm-hmm.
and the other version of her starts to do the same thing. It's like they mirror one another.
Okay.
I'm a little foggy on it because it's been a minute since I've watched it, but I do remember feeling like an uneasiness watching it, which was weird for me, but I think it was more an uneasiness of not understanding exactly why this was happening to this girl. Like, they don't really go into it as much as you would like, but they leave you just enough to be interested in what's going on. And by the end of the film, I mean, her face is all fucked up. The girl's just messed up, and she goes back to camming, but she goes under a different alias and everything else. But it kind of hints that it might not be over. This is one of those films. I think it was a good film, but I do think being on Netflix was the right call.
Right.
Like, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good movie, but I don't think going to the theater would have helped it.
Right.
So I know I'm not giving you a whole lot on this one, but
That's fair. No, I mean, if you don't want to spoil anything, I'm all right with it.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. I mean, it is what it is. It's about webcamming, and at that time, camming was becoming like a mainstream thing. So the movie came out in the perfect time.
Yeah.
There's always been people on webcams doing that kind of stuff, but then when TikTok started like talking about it more, and when all that stuff started coming out into the mainstream more, why not make a movie about it?
Sure.
You know, it sort of showed, to me, the film had a deeper meaning, and it was showing that sometimes people convey themselves on the internet differently than how they are in real life.
And that's true.
And I feel like this manifestation of this girl that stole her account and was doing all this stuff was a manifestation of the darker side of her.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, maybe I'm overthinking it, but that's the feeling that the film gave me.
Right. No, I get it.
Now, this other one I really love. I've watched it a few times. It's on Netflix. It's called The Ritual. Ring any
I don't
bells?
think I've heard that one either, yeah.
So, The Ritual came out October 13th, 2017. That was the UK release. I think it came out here at the same time. I'm going to read this synopsis to you, too, real quick.
Okay.
Reuniting after the tragic death of their friend, four college pals set out to hike through the Scandinavian wilderness. A wrong turn leads them into a mysterious forest of Norse legend, where an ancient evil exists and stalks them at every turn. This film was praised for its effects. The monster in it, if you get the chance, do you have another window opened on your computer?
I do.
Real quick, look up The Ritual Monster.
Okay.
Just to show you. And if you click images, any of them will do. It's a looker.
Like a
Looks like a deer.
horns.
It looks like
yeah,
a deer,
with-
a giant deer with a human torso hanging from it. And it's got these two spots
Yeah.
that look like yellow glowing eyes.
Wicked.
These friends are going through the forest. They decide that they want to cut through a path instead of going the long way. And they end up in the forest. These monsters are called, it's like Jotun or something of that nature. It's J-O...
Oh, the Jotun. So this is
Jotuns.
like Norse.
Yes.
Norse.
Thank you. I
okay.
couldn't think of the name. I'm terrible with pronunciation sometimes.
That's okay.
So they get lost in the wilderness. They find this cabin, and in the attic of this cabin, these people built this thing that looks like the head of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, where I talk about like the effects and the visuals, their friend got killed during a robbery at a store. like at a convenience store that they stopped in. And they actually, like, they're in the forest, but then the forest begins to, like, turn into, like, the trees start to, like, look like there's lights turning on, and then they're back there. They're there at that place.
Yeah.
And they deal with all of that, and it's like they're descending into this madness. Like, the creature is trying to basically drive them mad. Throughout the film, they press on, they go further and further and further, and they end up in a village. And that's where we get a really good look at this creature. This creature comes in, and it just annihilates this village trying to get to these people. And it can't leave the forest. That plays a big part of the film a little later on.
Okay.
I think maybe only 1 or 2 of the friends actually make it out.
Hmm.
But this film does one of those things, the best way I can describe it, this film puts me in the mind of Jaws a little bit.
Okay.
In the aspect of, Jaws was so great at keeping you thrilled and keeping you on the edge of your seat, because you don't see Jaws that much until the end of the film.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they do with this thing. And for me, the biggest thing about this film was they made the monster look, it looked
Yeah, it's a
phenomenal.
fantastic design. I like
Yes.
that.
And to see it in the film, when it walks in the film, it moves. It's heavy-footed. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
It moves, which is the shrug and the down, and the facial area of it with the arms. You know, it looks like a headless human torso dangling off the front of it.
Mm-hmm.
You see that move like a torso would move if it was being jerked around. You just kind of, and it actually uses those hands. It grabs a hold of one of the guys and it lifts him up with it. And the moment that you see it, you're just like, what the hell is going on here? But this was another one of those films. I was just scrolling through Netflix one day, and it was when it was new on there, and I was like, this looks interesting.
Yeah.
And, you know, Netflix automatically plays a little bit of the trailer, and I was like, why not? I'll give it a watch, see what happens. I'm so glad that I did, because roping the story in with what happened to their friend and this creature playing on that to basically drive them further off their path, drive them further to madness, just, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I wish it would have gone to theaters. I wish this film would have gone to theaters. I know Netflix sometimes puts its movies in, like, limited theaters. This would have been fantastic to see on a big screen.
Sure.
It's a basic concept. It's 4 grieving friends going to honor their buddy by doing what they all used to do together, and then it takes a supernatural turn.
Yeah.
So definitely one of those ones. That's another one you'll have to give a watch and see what you think. So
Yeah, you're making me want to go to Netflix and start watching these films.
yeah, there's some good ones that, like, that's the one thing. Like, no offense to Netflix, I feel like Netflix has kind of been lacking lately, and I feel like they've been canceling some things that they shouldn't. But
Under a lot of scrutiny lately,
Yeah.
especially because of their password
yeah,
nonsense.
all that craziness. But their horror game, I'm telling you, it is just... You know, they just got the rights to another Stephen King film, I believe. I'm struggling with the name. It's got one of the kids from Stranger Things, and I think it's got one of the Sutherlands in it. What's the dad's name?
Donald?
Is it Donald Sutherland? He plays an older man that dies, and this kid puts a phone... The kid had gotten him a cell phone or something,
Mm-hmm.
and he puts the phone in his grave, like in his pocket, and he starts getting phone calls from him.
I don't know. I feel like I know what you're talking about, though, but a name is slipping my mind.
I'm going to see if I can find it. See if I can find this real quick.
Mr. Harrigan's phone?
That's what it is. Thank you.
Bam.
You found it
welcome.
before I did. And I haven't watched it yet. I believe it's out, but it even looked really good. Something
It sounds
about
interesting.
Netflix and horror. You mentioned one earlier that was a Netflix exclusive, Gerald's Game,
Mm-hmm.
which fantastic.
A rough watch, though, let me tell you.
I know you. I know we've talked about that scene in the past where she
Mhm.
degloves herself. And we ain't talking about taking off winter gloves. We're talking about skin gloves.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Just a thought makes me... Ugh. I don't know what it is.
And The Haunting of Hill House, it's not a movie, but The Haunting of Hill House was fantastic as well.
Yeah.
Now, if you've got another one, I'll let you go ahead and name one, but I've got one that we can both talk about that we've both seen that I'm so glad that you mentioned for me to watch. So, but
Yeah, I want to bring this one up specifically because, granted, it did have a theatrical release, but not here, okay? So I want to make that very clear. I am aware it had a theatrical release, just not here in the United States. And the reason I wanted to bring this one up is because I'm sure I could think of another if another would come to mind, but it's to point out that sometimes that maybe we would miss out on good horror films from other countries that are never going to be released theatrically here. So the only way we're going to get to see them is streaming, and sometimes they can get lost in the shuffle. But there are these gems that exist out there that may not get the attention they deserve because they are imported from another country. The one I'm eyeballing right now is One Cut of the Dead. I dismissed this movie immediately upon seeing the cover. That's my fault. But I gave it a watch. And man, am I so glad that I did. Because it really impressed the shit out of me. Not just the narrative, but how they shot it. We're talking one consistent, consecutive shot. And I'm almost positive that was what I heard, is at the very beginning of the film, pretty much the first 20 to 30 minutes is one consecutive shot. And if it's not, they sure as hell trick the hell out of everybody else.
Real quick, sorry to interrupt you. Let me think if I've got this right. This is the film where they are filming a zombie movie and an actual zombie outbreak happened.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I wasn't sure what to think of the film initially, because the concept, you listen to it, and I went in with no expectations, okay? So I had no idea what it was. And all I knew is that somebody's making a film and zombies. And I was honestly at a point where zombies and I just weren't seeing eye to eye. If you catch my drift, I was so done with the genre. And so when people were like, oh, you got to check out the zombie movie, I'm like, yeah, but do I really? Because zombies, man. Like, even today, I watched a trailer for a game that looked like it was riding on the coattails of The Last of Us, because the font and everything looked like The Last of Us. Yeah. Then you see the gameplay and they're running through this city and it's all empty, and you think, okay, well, it looks like it's playing like The Last of Us, and then you start to see zombies off in the background. It's like, well, is it not? I'm not sure, but it's zombies. It's just bang, bang, zombies, bang, bang, zombies. And I'm like, yes, but we've done this 100 times over. How many games are there where you run around and kill zombies?
Yeah.
So that's how I felt about the movies. Oh my God, here's another one. Oh, we get to kill zombies. Or, oh, we're running from zombies. Who cares? But then a movie like this comes out.
Yeah.
And surprises the hell out of me. Much like Train to Busan. They did something different.
Yeah.
With the concept. So this, I'm hesitant to talk about it too much, because if you've never seen it, I highly recommend you watch it with no expectation other than what we just said. People are trying to film a zombie movie, and then before you know it, actual zombies come into play to attack, and that's what you need to know. No more than that. And there's a reason we're keeping it simple, because there's an interesting little wrinkle to the story that I feel like ruins it if you find out that wrinkle.
You just made me think of something funny. It's sort of related but not related to the subject. I saw this YouTube video the other day. It shows a guy looking out his window, and he sees a bunch of zombies. So he gears up and he goes out and he has a baseball bat and he obliterates all these zombies. And then he looks over and there's a filming crew and they're all looking at him completely shocked. I don't know why I just thought of that.
But yeah, I highly recommend this film. And again, I know it was a theatrical release, so some people might argue in regards to that, but not here. Yeah. This is Japanese box office, so we only got it because it finally got imported. Now, if it did wind up stateside, any kind of theatrical run, I don't know about it. So just where I'm at with it, that's what I know, and I feel like I wouldn't have gotten to see it had it not been on a streaming service. May have not even heard about it had it not gotten released on a streaming service, and never given it a second thought, and that would have been my loss.
Yeah.
So
see, I actually
keep that in mind.
I actually remember I was watching some YouTube videos about really good zombie movies that kind of flew under the radar, and that one was actually, like, it was in the top 5, I believe. That's the only reason why I remember when you started talking about it. I was like, that's the one where they're filming a zombie movie and zombies actually come out of the woodwork. Yeah. So I do remember that one.
Highly recommend it.
Speaking of zombies, not to confuse this with the 80s movie. There was a movie that came out in 2019 called Little Monsters. Ring any bells?
Did I watch that one? I don't think I watched that one, but it was one of those that I've been wanting to watch.
It is hilarious. It is probably one of my favorite movies on Hulu. It's a simple concept. A teacher going on a field trip takes the kids, and zombies invade the area.
Mm-hmm.
And the teacher somehow manages to keep all the kids safe and everything. I think the funniest thing to me about the movie, though, there is a kids entertainer in it who is played by the gentleman that does Olaf's voice for the Frozen movies.
Yeah.
And he is kind of a jerk in it.
Okay.
But he gets attacked. There's a puppeteer with a little frog puppet, and the little frog puppet can talk, even though the guy's a zombie, and the puppet looks like a little zombie. And they attack him, and they kill him.
Okay.
It was one of those films, it was sort of just, it was a big surprise to me when I saw it. I did not think that it was going to be good, but man, it was entertaining. And it's a Hulu exclusive, but
It's one that I've wanted to watch, and I'll be absolutely honest with you. One of the reasons I haven't is because of Josh Gad. I am not a fan of his.
yeah.
At all. So when I saw him, I was like,
Luckily, he's not, I mean, he is in it for a decent amount, but when he gets his comeuppance, you're like, yeah, you deserve that. So,
yeah. I mean, there's even a show that I watched him on HBO, and he plays an absolute tool.
yeah.
And it just makes me hate him even more. And I don't know why I dislike him. It's just something about him that I don't care for. And seeing him play a jerk just makes me care for him even less. So,
Yeah.
And I know he's beloved. I know people like Olaf, so I hate it for them, but I can't help that I don't care for him.
Now, I have one other one here. It's one that I'll be honest, I've not seen it all in one full setting, but I do know, I know the whole story because of all the stuff that I've seen. I believe it was a Netflix exclusive, if I remember right. I might be wrong. It could be Hulu, but I believe it was Netflix. Cargo.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Not ringing a bell? Now, they based this off of, if I remember right, they based this off of a YouTube short. But the story, it's a Netflix exclusive. Martin Freeman is the main character in it.
Oh, well, now see, you've sold me right there. I have heard of this. Yes, okay. Yes.
Yeah, so I'll read the synopsis for anybody that doesn't know what it is. But stranded in rural Australia in the aftermath of a violent pandemic, an infected father desperately searches for a new home for his infant child and a means to protect her from his own changing nature. Talk about an angle that you don't get to see a lot. Somebody knows they're going to become a zombie, and they want to make sure that they can keep their family protected.
Yeah.
That is,
I
his...
remember seeing a trailer for this because I saw him, and Martin Freeman is one of those actors. If you're not familiar with him, I'm sure you've seen him in something.
Yeah.
If you don't know him by name. But I feel like he's an actor that is underrated.
Yeah.
I don't think he gets the praise he deserves because he is solid in just about anything I've seen him in.
Yeah. No, he's one of those actors that I can't remember. I had just watched something with him in it, and then I had heard about this movie coming out, and I was excited about it for that reason. But even in the there is a YouTube video, and I think that they actually follow the initial story of what happened pretty similarly. And what it is I think they get into a car accident or something, and he doesn't have a way to get out of his side of the car or something of that nature, and he has to get his daughter, and he gets bit by his wife. And I do know there's even a scene in the movie where he puts a piece of meat, he ties like a piece of meat on like a stick, and he puts it out in front of him, and he has his daughter on his back so he can't reach her.
Yeah.
And he uses it as a way to like move, and I believe he even blinds himself. In this movie, he becomes friends with some other kid. Like, he runs into like a kid that's like part of a tribe or something, if I remember correctly. And he actually blinds himself so that he can't hurt them. But just seeing the lengths that he would go to protect his children, like, talk about it. You know the character's gonna die.
Yeah.
And you get this whole attachment to him and everything through the film, just to know that it's not going to end well for him. But at least he's making sure that his daughter is going to be safe. Like, that to me is, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely need to get on that because, like I said, I love Martin Freeman. I think he's a solid actor. In fact, I'm even going to praise him just a step further. one of the main reasons I cannot tolerate, and I hate to say it like this because I'm sure there are fans abounds out there. One of the reasons I cannot watch The American Office is because of Martin Freeman being so solid in the original UK version of The Office. His character, Tim, in that show was so perfect.
Yeah.
That anybody who tried to be him, I know, what's his name? The guy that played, he was in A Quiet Place, directed it. John Krasinski.
Yes.
There we go. He's essentially Martin Freeman's character in The Office.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the parallel there. And he may do a great job. And I know people love him and the character arc and everything, but Martin Freeman is just so perfect that when I saw John Krasinski, I'm like, you're not doing it for me, dude, because you just seem like a cheap knockoff. And I hate it because I know people love that show, but I just couldn't do it. I saw too many comparisons.
And I get where you're coming from. Now, I do have to say, I don't think this movie was through a streaming service. I know it was it had a very limited theatrical release, and it did air at some film festivals. There was a movie called Maggie. Speaking of zombie movies, just real quick.
I remember that, yep.
That was from another angle where it showed the slow descent of a girl into a zombie. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was in it as her father. I heard really good things about it, too. I didn't get the chance to watch it either.
It was all right. It wasn't anything that really stuck with me too long. Because if it had, I probably would have been like, oh my God, yeah. But I mean, it was good for what it was. It was definitely something different for Arnold since he wasn't really an action lead in this. It was more dramatic.
Yeah.
And you don't really see that out of him very often. So it was definitely a change of pace for him specifically. And I think Abigail Breslin was the actress who played his daughter. And of course, she's a solid act all around. So she nailed it.
Well, from what I remember, it's like right before she knows she's getting ready to turn, I think, toward the end of the film. Doesn't she, like, go jump off of their roof or something? Or she does something to kill herself, I believe?
Something like that, yeah.
Because from what I remember, because I watched a clip from it, and I remember her coming into the room, and he's, like, asleep, and, like, you kind of think she's going to attack him. But then she walks off, and, like, her life flashes before her eyes as she's, like, jumping off the roof because she wants to die as a human.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think streaming services, that's where they are doing a little bit better. The big studios, it seems like they want to go with the same old thing that they've always gone with. Like, we have the recipe, we know what works. And so the streaming services are taking, just like with indie filmmakers, they're taking concepts that the big studios aren't necessarily sure about, and they're going, let's put that out, and let's see how that goes. And it's going really well. And I honestly think some of the studios and some of the directors that are out there that are shitting on this, as bad as it sounds, I think it is like a petty thing, like jealousy almost. Like, why didn't we make a film like that? Why didn't we try to do something different?
And to discourage anyone, because I feel like that discourages young filmmakers, indie filmmakers who think that their movies are not going to be worth a damn because they didn't get the theatrical run. They maybe only got a streaming deal, or maybe it got picked up by a streaming service to get out there. But you know what? Your film got out there. It's being projected to millions of audience members. Now, whether or not they choose to watch it is up to them. But if it's out there, that's a great start.
Yeah.
Because all it takes is one, and then they tell somebody else, and then that spreads to more and more, and then word of mouth catches on, and before you know it, your movie has been seen and praised by so many people. So don't count yourself short. All these people, all these big, highfalutin directors who think that it has to be in theaters, yes, the theater experience is one of a kind. I get it. But some of us cannot make it there. So we will take what we can get to get our start, to get our name. They've got nothing to talk about, especially when a lot of them, let's look at Spielberg for one, since he was one of the people saying, well, a movie, if it just came to Netflix, it can't be nominated for Academy Award. Well, dude, you're the man who started on television, okay? You directed television. That's how you got your start. So that is a stepping stone. This is a stepping stone for other people.
Yep.
So don't knock it. This is just a way to get there, a new way to get there.
And, I've been thinking a lot lately about when we talked with Lloyd Kaufman, when we talked with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of told us, he was like, you have to sit back and you have to decide what you want to do. If you want to, try to make a lot of money, or and go to the big theaters, or if you want to make movies that you love and put that out there. Do you want to be on the red carpet, or do you want to be making films that you're proud of, putting your name out there?
Yeah.
And I get that.
Mm-hmm.
I know some indie filmmakers. Some indie filmmakers don't make a whole lot. Other indie filmmakers, they do make a decent amount. You can make money off of that. And honestly, if I were to make a film and make some money, at the end of the day, I'd just open my own theater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who cares if it's playing in every theater all over the place? It doesn't need to be. If it's in streaming services and somebody wants to see it on the big screen, I got a theater you can come see it at. Come see it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a lot of great films, and I think some directors have started coming around. I know I was really happy with Martin Scorsese. He has released some stuff on Netflix. He's been trying to work with Netflix, and he's said, as long as filmmakers are getting their stuff out there, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
And I firmly agree with that. Streaming service or not, I mean...
And to be fair, most streaming services are hands-off. They just want the product.
Yeah.
So if Martin Scorsese wanted to go make the movie he wanted to make, next up, Netflix will just buy it. They don't give a shit. It's just like, you made another movie? We'll take it.
Yeah.
Give it here. And therefore, you have no studio interference. You can make the movie you want to make without these studio notes to say, can we do this? Or maybe the characters don't do that.
Yep.
And then you're just like, no, but now you're just ruining it. It's like, yeah, but you see, data suggests, and you're just like, fuck, dude, you're ruining my film because you want to do it your way.
And look at it this way. Look how easy it is to actually put a film on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
I could go out in my backyard and film something and do a little bit of editing, and I could put it on there. I could find a streaming service to put it on.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you want to make sure that you're putting a good product out there, but
Right.
They want the content, and sometimes that's all that matters. If somebody wants it, if somebody gives you a means to put it out there, that's all you need sometimes.
Yep.
And that's where the streaming services, I think, are getting a lot of these great things. There's so many people out there with ideas, and certain studios, it's so much red tape, so much, we have to change this, this doesn't matter, this needs to change, this needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite comedians, this is kind of off topic, but it's still within the realm here, Christopher Titus. When his show Titus was on, Fox wanted to make changes, and he told Fox that's not how it should be. And so what did they do? Instead of firing him because they had a contract, they put his show on at a time that most people weren't going to watch it. The ratings plummeted, and then they had a means to get rid of him.
Mm-hmm.
Anymore, if he wanted to sign a deal with anything, I think he had a show on YouTube, on their premium thing, or somewhere. He had some kind of show. It was about cops or something. I'm trying to remember.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I can't remember. Special
PD or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And it was like an off-the-walls show, but it did really well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they let him take the reins. Like, respect your writers. I think that's the other thing about streaming services. They respect the writers and everything else. And I'm not saying that always happens, but it does seem like it happens a lot more. So, But yeah, I'm going to give it to streaming services all day when it comes to that regard. And honestly, just go out there and click into their exclusives, see what they've got to offer. And I don't want to... I want to bring this one up. We don't have to go into great detail. I'm just going to tell the people out there listening, if you haven't watched it yet, Psycho Goreman on Shudder. Watch that movie. It is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's like...
one of my all-time favorites on that platform.
It's like an 80s/90s campy horror film comedy all wrapped into one. It's the sitcom you didn't know you needed.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure there's some other ones that I could probably think of. I feel like we could do a multiple-part episode on something like this subject, but as of right now, I'm not having anything come to mind. So
no, I think we've covered all our brains will allow us to right now.
But yeah, maybe that's a good question for this episode. What streaming service film did you really enjoy and why that we didn't mention?
So Ramblers, like Lester said, what streaming or film that went directly to streaming that you know of that we didn't talk about that you love and you want to share with everybody, tell us on Twitter at Horror Ramblings. We'll read it out to our fellow ramblers and say, hey, you remember all those movies we said? Well, they said this and they recommend it too. So go do all that. And if you got a whole list, if you've got like a mile-long list of everything that we missed, send us it in an email because a tweet's just not going to cover it. And you can do that at horrorramblings@gmail.com. I don't know where I was about to go with that. If you just want to tell us directly, you can join our Facebook group or you can join our Discord and hang out with other like-minded. We could turn this into an entire conversation, and then we can just do it right there on the spot. You don't even have to wait until next week. You can find us on Instagram to see an assortment of horror images. If you're feeling generous, want to support this show financially and see exclusive stuff like that video version of Uncle Lloydie. Yeah, we did a video version of that. If you missed that, head on over to patreon.com/pencil and paper productions. $1 singular dollar, and you can see our lovely faces and see his lovely face, and when he's playing his little clarinet and everything. Video versions only on Patreon. Tell your friends to find us on their favorite podcasting app. You can leave us a 5-star review if you're feeling generous. You can leave us a review on those platforms, and you can even answer our questions and polls on Spotify and let us know what you think. And finally, if you prefer a central hub for all things, pencilpaperproductions.com/horror-ramblings. Links are in the show notes for your convenience.
And remember, guys, stay spooky out there.
This has been the Horror Ramblings podcast. Join us next time for even more.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.